So I got early access to Zibai, or should I say bye-bye to enemies when she rolls up and starts horsing around with this crazy damage. But I'm not just here to hype up the next on-field Geo DPS unit, whom we will be stuck with for at least 2 years. No, I am also here to showcase tons of her teams and loadouts, even if she really only has one archetype, but luckily enough, she's got some of the best potential for free-to-play players. In fact, she doesn't even rely that much on Illuga or Bina, as some would have expected. Anyway, in this video, I'm going to review and showcase Constellation Zero Zibai so that you can decide for yourself if she's worth pulling for. Alright, so in this showcase video, Zibai will be equipped with the 4-star craftable Flute of Espitzel, which is actually really good since I did some quick field testing, and it ends up like few percent behind the best 5-star stat stick, Uraku Misugiri, and roughly 25% worse than her signature, which is to be expected. Interestingly enough, Harbinger of Dawn, the 3-star sword, is like only 5% or so worse than Espitzel, although if you want to fully utilize its critical rate boost, she will need to have good shielding and some healing. But besides that, she's also using Sky Set with Defense Sands, Defense Goblet, and Critical Rate Circlet. I'll be honest, Sky Set is the only set worth considering, nothing else even comes close. Lastly, her talents are all raised to level 10, and she's Constellation 0. Oh, and yeah, I am on Creator Experience server, so final content is subject to change. Anyway, so Zibai specializes in dealing a ton of Lunar-Crystallize damage, which is primarily achieved by using her skill. When tapped, she enters a Lunar Phase Shift mode and gains Geo Infusion for normal and charged attacks. But most importantly, this little bar shows up on the left, which tracks her Phase Shift Radiance points. And when it reaches this little moon, a skill button can be tapped to consume the points, and she will summon a Horsey who will deal 2 counts of damage, the second hit being Lunar-Crystallize. As you can see, with this free-to-play build and team, the first hit is about 32k regular Geo damage, and then a massive 224k Lunar-Crystallize hit. This special skill tap can be repeated up to 4 times, and then Zibai exits the mode immediately. Otherwise, she can maintain this mode for 15 seconds. Now, to keep things simple, I'll just call Phase Shift Radiance points as PSR. So, she can have a maximum of 100 PSR, and she needs 70 PSR to unleash the special skill. She earns 10 points every second while in this mode, so even just by doing nothing, she could unleash 2 skills within the duration. Otherwise, she also gains 5 points when hitting enemies with normal attacks. Notice how on the final 4th normal hit, she also delivers Lunar-Crystallize damage. It's got decent damage, but it only really becomes relevant when Zibai's 4th constellation is unlocked. But yeah, finally, when in Ascendant Gleam state, the final and most important method of gaining PSR is through Lunar-Crystallize reaction. When anybody causes this reaction in the team, Zibai's PSR increases by 40. However, this point generation can only happen every 4 seconds. So any comps that can spam a lot of Lunar-Crystallize reactions will have as much effect as slower teams due to this 4-second cooldown. Still, as we can see here, when Zibai actively uses normal attacks in addition to Lunar-Crystallize, it takes her about 11 seconds roughly to unload all 4 skills. However, compared to just her chilling out and letting Lunar-Crystallize do all the work, it's only 3 seconds slower before she can unleash all 4 skills. However, things are much worse if you decide to play her without another Nod-Krai unit on the team, since without Ascendant Gleam, she cannot gain those 40 PSR points from Lunar-Crystallize, and even with a solid looking team like this one, she's only able to squeeze out 3 skill taps. Moral of the story, don't use Zibai without another Nod-Krai unit. Now, when it comes to the burst, it's really simple. She unleashes 2 counts of AoE damage, the second hit being Lunar-Crystallize. You can look at the damage here when using 4 of these weapons, but basically, it's like an extra skill tap damage amount. The most interesting thing about the burst is that it extends the skill's duration by 1.7 seconds when casted, which works in exactly the same way as Kenichi's burst. However, in Zibai's case, that extension is not a big deal. You can easily dish out all 4 skill taps without the burst, and honestly, the point of this burst is to just use it right after entering her skill mode, so that she can then generate some PSR while the burst animation is playing. Also, as a reminder, the second hit from the burst, second hit from the special skill, and after 4th hit from her Geo-infused normal attack all deal a slightly different type of Lunar-Crystallize damage when compared to the reaction itself. The main difference being this damage scales with Zibai's defense, hence why Defense Goblet is simply the best for her, while damage percent does not affect these special Lunar-Crystallize attacks. Overall, her rotation is quite simple. Just press skill to enter her lunar phase shift mode, then press burst if ready, and afterwards, spam her normal attacks, try to land 4th normal hit for extra Lunar-Crystallize damage, and unleash all 4 skill taps. Keep in mind, at 70 points she can do the skill tap, but sometimes it's worth waiting if you're in the middle of delivering the 4th normal attack to squeeze out as much damage as possible out of her, since you can store up to 30 points in the future with the 100 PSR cap. Anyway, moving over to the passives, first one is pretty simple. After casting the skill, or when the actual Lunar-Crystallize reaction triggers the damaging attacks, Zibai's special skill tap's second hit's damage, which is the Lunar-Crystallize damage, is increased by 60% of her defense. Honestly, this should happen every time, so just treat it as extra free damage. Then second passive improves her defense by 15% for each other Geo teammate, while Hydro teammate gives her 60 elemental mastery. Not gonna lie, since like 90% of her teams consist of 1 Hydro unit and 2 other Geo units, this usually means she ends up with extra 30% defense and 60 EM, which is fine. Finally, the third passive we've been seeing on all Nod-Krai 5 stars, and this one allows Zibai's team to trigger Lunar-Crystallize instead of Hydro-Crystallize. Plus, like always, she can improve that damage by up to 14%, or when she has 2000 defense. Very easy to achieve. And if you need a quick reminder, first time Geo is applied to Hydro, 3 of these Moondrift constructs are summoned, and then every 3rd Lunar-Crystallize reaction, 3 shots are fired off from these constructs, which deal damage based on everyone who contributed their application. Lastly, she has a really unique exploration ability. Normally I don't talk about these things, but basically from 6 PM to 6 AM, she will regenerate 1 energy every 2 seconds. So does that mean you should always explore with her during the night? Heck yeah, at least that's what I'm gonna be doing. Look at this, it only takes 2 minutes to fully refill her energy. What a deal. All in all, Zibai is not a very complicated character. I'm sure somebody will figure out her optimal combos once her banner arrives, but honestly, as long as she can deliver those 4 skill taps and use the burst, her damage already surpasses over 1.2 million per rotation. Like, she's easily one of the strongest units in the game right now. But all of this depends which teammate is buffing her. So let's talk about this next. So I think we can first start with Illuga. I'm still not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right, but anyway. He is the new 4-star Geo polearm unit, and sadly, I don't think I will have the time to make his own dedicated video due to some personal life issues. So instead, here's a quick and dumbed down explanation. His skill deals a little bit of damage and generates a lot of Geo particles. His burst, on the other hand, when casted, for the next 20 seconds buffs Geo and Lunar-Crystallize damage, although only for character talents. So don't expect to boost the actual Lunar-Crystallize reaction. Now, this burst works in a similar manner as Lauma's or Shenhe's burst, as in, he usually grants like 30 stacks, which can be used up by the whole party, and it's flat damage added on top of their hits. Lastly, his passive grants 5% critical rate, 10% critical damage, and in the Ascendant Gleam state, another 50 EM for everyone. I mean, look, C0 Illuga ends up buffing Zibai's damage by about 25 to 30%, but that's assuming he is with a full EM build, since that's how his buffing scales. It's pretty strong, but at C0, I wouldn't consider him to be an essential teammate for Zibai if you have a limited amount of picks to choose from. And that is because, for example, C6 Goro actually provides 14% more buffing than C0 Illuga. I know, it's unfair to compare it this way, but older players might have C6 Goro. Another funny example is C0 Zhongli with Instructor set. He ends up about as good as C0 Illuga, except he also gives that fat shield. Same goes for Shilonen. Even with Sindri City set, she's still better than C0 Illuga. It is important to know that Geo barely has any access to Geo resistant shredding, so both Zhongli's shield and Shilonen's skill are highly valued here. Yes, the Geo resonance gives minus 20%, but it's not enough with all things considered. Point is, there's decent amount of Geo options to go for besides the Ratnik. Still, at C6, Illuga's buffing becomes about as good as C6 Goro's, although to be fair, his burst duration is 20 seconds, which is really nice and flexible for rotations, while Goro's skill and burst have a much shorter duration. Truth be told, like the best free-to-play team I could think of right now would be Goro, Illuga, and Aino, especially if you have them at C6. Zibai can easily start dishing out big damage, like I am talking about some serious power creep. Still, what about Hydro options? Well, obviously Columbina is going to be the best pick, but her buffs for Zibai aren't that amazing. Like C6 Aino can do that job quite well too. The difference here is going to be Bina's own personal damage contribution, which is so big that it ends up boosting any Zibai's team's performance by 20% usually. But I wouldn't say that without Bina, Zibai is going to struggle, or how should I put it? It's not the same situation as with Nefer and Lauma, it's a lot less serious. But yeah, right now, I would say the best meta team would be made up of Bina, C6 Illuga, and then a flexible unit, usually reserved for either Zhongli, C6 Goro, or Innefa. That's right, Binefa actually seems to work quite well here. And while Zibai's own personal damage won't look as great if she was with any of the other buffers, well, at least Binefa core delivers a lot of sub DPS support. Plus, Innefa's shielding feels nice on Zibai when doing her rotation. My own personal favorite so far was Bina, Illuga, and Zhongli comp, because it's very easy to pilot it, and it also worked really well when I replaced Bina with Aino. However, stepping outside of Nod-Krai, this comp with Albedo and Mona as the Hexerai core was decent. Granted, I was also using Columbina, so the only thing I would say is that if you don't have C4 Mona, this team is a bit more disappointing to be honest. Now, I've also tried out Chiori as the last flexible slot, and she was great. Illuga ends up boosting both Zibai's and Chiori's damage, and the rotations are pretty simple, although I will say in this specific team, I've noticed the lack of healing, which luckily got kind of resolved with Bina's prototype Amber Catalyst. Also, if you're wondering about other Hydro options other than Bina or Aino, well, I went for this team of Farina and Shilonen. The damage percent increase from both Shilonen and Farina isn't that great for Zibai, and I was also using her in Nefa to make sure Ascendant Gleam state is activated. But honestly, I had a much better time with Yelan, since her coordinated attacks easily synergize with Zibai's kit, and while that damage percent buff from Yelan is meh, you could equip her with Elegy to boost the team's elemental mastery. Still, with C0 Illuga and Zhongli, I'd say this is another solid archetype you can go for, and if you don't have Yelan, Xingqiu also works nicely. At the end of the day, Zibai needs at least one other Nod-Krai unit on the team, and right now it's either Bina or Aino in Hydro, or Illuga in Geo. Sometimes, in rare cases, Innefa can help with that too. But again, her team archetype is basically Hydro, Geo, and a flexible option, usually reserved for a second Geo support, so most teams end up running triple Geo comps. Heck, at this point, might as well call it Mono Geo. So, what do I think about Zibai? Well, I usually don't share my own personal bias in these videos, but she's my second favorite Nod-Krai DPS after Flynn's. Although, I feel like with Flynn's, at least he has more invincibility frames when spamming his own skill, whereas with Zibai, she can get knocked around sometimes if I didn't bring a shielder. Still, I believe she's going to be an excellent beginner unit, as strange as that sounds, since Aino is given away for free and Illuga is on the banner. I mean, at the time of recording this video, I am not sure which 4 stars are going to be featured with Zibai, but if it would be Goro at least, man, this would be an insane banner to pull from. Like, the thing is, all she needs is Flute of a Spitsoul, a decent Sky artifact set, and a bunch of 4-star teammates. And suddenly, she's like one of the best DPS units in the game. I don't have the DPS dummy on Creator server, but I can assure you, you will see other players showcasing her DPS meter day 1 on the dummy, and it will easily surpass 100k with a full free-to-play comp. The only drawback I could think of right now would be that she does heavily rely on other unit constellations, like C6 Aino, C6 Illuga, C6 Goro. Each of them provides significant boosting for her. And since Geo doesn't have an artifact set which reduces Geo resistance, that means Shilonen and Zhongli are quite premium for that extra Geo resistance shred. I mean, sure, you can get minus 20% from Geo resonance bonus, but as you just saw yourself, that shredding along with minor buffs is about as good as having C0 Illuga. Otherwise, she's a great unit, has a pretty simple playstyle, and I only wish sometimes that's how Ningguang should have ended up. Well, Zibai is now the new Liyue boss, I guess. Anyway, thanks for watching the video, make sure to subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to press the like button. Bye bye!